At CrossFit Stonecutter, our purpose is to inspire, enroll, and lead all willing athletes and organizations to achieve excellence by teaching them the physical and mental skills necessary to transform their bodies, minds, and cultures. It is our firm belief that by doing so, we are enabling them to achieve their goals, support their families, and improve the world around them. Hello and welcome to Pound the Rock Podcast. My name is Katie Sloyer. I am your host today. Episode 5.
Yep.
And we have the good old Josh Wilson back. Welcome back.
I promise this time I won't pound the table. I will not mumble. Well, it's going to be hard because I have a microphone just right in front of my face. So it'll be very hard for me to mess that up, but I'm sure I will.
I'm happy to have you to the official studio and not our bootleg version.
In the middle of the gym, cars flying back and forth outside, people coming in. You got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. Got to start from the bottom, and then it looks like we're making progress.
We're teaching people about adaptation.
Exactly.
Experimentation and adaptation.
That's right. If it doesn't work, keep changing it until it starts working, right?
That's right.
Well, welcome back. I'm happy to have you on the end of the Age Online Qualifier. I'm sure you're excited to be done with that.
I am.
Sorry if what I talk about doesn't make any sense. I'm a little jet lagged. Just got in last night.
Totally excused.
Yeah, right. So if I just start blubbering and just stumbling over my words, just stop me and take over because
It'll be a switch from when you're normally telling me to speak up, stop mumbling.
Yeah, right.
You're making no sense.
I'm 11 days removed from the community, so I have a lot of catching up to do. I haven't had any time with you to catch up, so this is kind of like our time to catch up. I did get wind of online age qualifiers a little bit, but not much. But I wanted to chat with you about kind of what was your expectation for the age online qualifier. Did it meet your expectations as far as like the workout quality? Did it measure? It was only 4 workouts, right?
Correct.
Did it measure everybody the way it should have? Now they're only taking 10. A lot's changed.
A lot's changed, and I think, you got to be careful when you could start, commenting on the different workouts. It was actually, now that I think about it, it was 5. I've blocked some things out of my mind from the back.
I think they call that traumatizing events you block out.
But, I think it's like anything, right? When you look at the group of people that CrossFit HQ has in place to program, obviously led by Dave Castro and then a few other key folks, they know what they're doing, and they know how to appropriately test things in an online format versus a live format, and there's limitations that you have. From my perspective, what I personally expected and what I prepared my athletes for that I've been asked to either coach or be on coaching teams with, I think it met what I thought would happen. And I think it thoroughly tested and balanced what happened in the open. In the open, you had a more traditional test of traditional capacity, and that's usually the way it's been, but also with quite a bit of skill. And I think the same thing happened in the online qualifiers. What I found very interesting about the online qualifiers, and I'm just going to oversimplify this, is that the online qualifiers really tested a certain subset of skills and recovery as it pertains to being able to deal with muscular endurance and CNS recovery in a short period of time. I mean, the reality is that age group online qualifiers are taking our youngest athletes and then everyone over the age of 35, and they're testing them in a very finite period of time. So you have to be ready, and you have to be able to recover and execute in a very short period of time. Whereas in the open, you can do one workout once or twice, or 3 times or 4 times over a weekend, but you're doing the same thing and you're changing it, and you have more and more opportunities. So I don't think from year to year it changed so much in the effectiveness of its ability to measure fitness. I think what it did this year was really test a good subset of skills that no matter what your age is, your height, your strengths and weaknesses, that if you're just not really fit and you're not ready to come to the game, then there's going to be some challenges. But I don't think that was any different than any year before. Last year there were some really tough workouts, and there were some things that they didn't test, but you don't need them to be tested. They were tested in the open, they'd be tested in the games. So it met my expectation in that regard. And I don't think there's ever. I know there's a lot of naysayers out there that go, okay, hey, the Open could have been so much better this year, and that's so subjective. At the end of the day, in CrossFit, we're doing broad time and modal domains. We're looking at being ready for the unknown and unknowable. You should be ready to do anything. And sometimes when you do everything, it's not going to go off well. It's going to look kludgy, or it's just going to be different. Everyone expects power cleans, pull-ups, thrusters, and burpees. And if it's not that, then they want to sit there and say it's not CrossFit. It's not an accurate test of fitness, and that's generally the lay people. And so for me, I think it did meet expectations. And I think for those that understand programming and what it is, it was a great qualifier. It was a beatdown. There was no easy workout. Every single workout did, however, require you to have a tremendous aerobic capacity and ability for your CNS to recover, and for you to be able to recover while you were moving. And that is something that many athletes do not have. So that was one of the things I did think was unique about this one, is it really did require that. There wasn't a workout anywhere, even the shorter one with the handstand push-ups and essentially Isabel and handstand push-ups, that required you to not have been as impacted or unable to recover from the other workouts that you've done, regardless of the order that you do these in. So I think from that standpoint, that was what the premium was placed on this year, was recovery. Now, that's just my opinion. There's a lot of other ways to look at that. Sure. It's also my opinion through the lens of the athletes that I coach. But, if you were to ask some of the coaching gods out there who are far more intelligent than I am, they would probably have a different perspective.
Sure. So let's recap to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. You had 3 athletes? Or what's the technical...
The technical count of athletes that I had in the age group online qualifier this year was 11. And of those 11 athletes, one has been to the games multiple times, and then the rest have...
Teresa.
Yeah.
Teresa Trojanowski?
Yes. She's been good enough to take a chance on a good friend of hers and let me help her over the last couple years in various capacities, and we've been working closely on that. And then there's several other athletes, some that are with another program called Compete Elite that I support and help. Sarah Blanc is one of those. And then obviously here at Stonecutter we have Cheryl Boyd.
And she's 50 to 59?
55 to 59.
Or, yeah.
And so those are the specific folks that I work with, and I think, and then there's various other athletes in different age categories that have asked me to help them either with their weightlifting or their durability or from a mental perspective, and so it made for a very interesting weekend. And it's different, and I think one of the things that I'll say for the specific group of athletes that I coach is that this is the first year that I've been coaching folks in the age group online qualifiers where everyone was inside the top 100. That's never happened before. Now, that's not saying Josh coached a bunch of people inside the top 100. That has nothing to do with it. These athletes all do incredibly hard work. They're going to do that on their own no matter who their coach is or where they're at. The online qualifier this year, I think everyone that I had the opportunity to work with really brought their A game this year, and some were in great personal circumstances, some were not. There's an athlete that only recently started helping with, and I'm on her coaching team. Her mother died a week before, and she's actually in Cheryl's age group, and she did really, really well. And she's just a person that I've given some feedback to, and haven't really had a chance to get into her programming, but she showed a tremendous mental fortitude and placed well within the top 100. I think she was 18th. And so, I think it's, for me, what I saw with that group of athletes coming out of it is that they all kept the main thing. They all stayed focused and committed to the process of what they were doing. Post the competition, they analyzed where they were at and what their next steps were going to be, and took the time to do that and allowed themselves the time to do that. Regardless of who your coach is or what program you're a part of, you have to own your process, and you have to own what comes next. Mm-hmm. Okay, whether that's the games, whether that's preparing for the next season, whether it's not preparing for the next season. I read something last night before this podcast, it was by accident, it just popped up. I was laughing at my wife. She'll punch me. We need to have her on the podcast. But she was watching her reality TV stuff that I can't stand, and I was laughing at that, and just happened to be scrolling through some social media looking for something that she told me about, and Christy Irmo. Her cousin came to the gym off and on a couple years ago whenever he was in town visiting family. And so, I've got to see what that family is all about. Extremely fit family, great core values, great focus.
Is it her mom?
Her mom's
a games athlete?
Her mom's a games athlete, was in Cheryl's category,
Yeah,
and
right.
I believe qualified again this year. So what was interesting about reading her, though, is she qualified for the games via the Open this year and declined the invitation to focus on other things this year. And, that to me is a huge testament to she prepared this year. She works with the folks out at Invictus. She was ready to go, but even after qualifying, felt that there were other things she needed to focus on in her life, and declined that. And the reality is that's a huge example of where you go through a season, and she didn't go through the online qualifier, but at the end of her season, she reflected, right? And what I found very interesting about that is she added up where she was at, what she wanted to do, and what she wanted to focus on, and was very clear about those things. Mm-hmm. And they're all still related to CrossFit and things like that. It's not like she's, I'm done with CrossFit on the next thing. It was, she just gotten married. She wanted to focus more on her gym, more on her athletes, more on that process, and be more present with her friends and her family as opposed to focusing on that. And that's something that I think by and large you don't find much at elite level competition in any sport or even in any life. One of the things we need to have a podcast on. I was talking about this with my wife. It doesn't have to be a whole one. Could have been on the tail end of one like this, but I do want to have a podcast with my wife on talking about how much she has to give up and the family has to give up for me to do what I do. Yeah. When you're doing an extreme in something, there's no balance. Right. If you're going to go to a level of pushing a boundary to an extreme, you are going to have to give up other things. And that isn't just in competition, that's in life.
Sure.
And so that creates a lack of balance elsewhere. And I think that what needs to happen for folks post the online qualifier, and what I was really proud of all these folks and what they did, is they did that automatically. There was no, okay, we need to sit down, we need to reevaluate, we need to look at where you're at. They all did that instinctively. And for that, I can tell you, that's a very rare thing among CrossFit competitors. And that's a very rare thing among anyone at any elite level. I don't do it. Yeah, my brain post online qualifier is, what did I not do right? What can I do better? How can I contribute better to their success in the future? Even though I'd be the first one to tell them, you need to sit down and look at the entire thing of your life and balance all these other things out. I didn't have a balanced approach in a lot of that, and that's where I always have to sit back and look at where I'm at for my values, what I'm trying to achieve as a coach, and make sure that what I'm doing for myself in support of them is what I need to be doing. So they all did that, and they all did that on their own, in their own way, and they did it successfully, and some are still going through it, and they will come out on the other end of it focused on where they need to be. But that's the thing about the process, right, is that needs to be the first piece of evaluation. So in that regard, this is one of the first groups of people I've coached through a competitive season. And there are still some other athletes in an active season right now that I'm coaching that, are still struggling to get that. It's a process for them. But for the age group qualifiers to have some really young people and some really experienced people get that and do that has been really great to watch.
Yeah, it's super cool. And it's hard to say if it's because they're older, right? So they've got other parts in their life that are going on, or if it's because of the specialty of who they are as an athlete, right? Because everybody's going to quick to say, well, Cheryl's got a family, so we've got to do this, and Teresa has a husband, so of course she's going to, reflect and get that. But I think it's just because you have really special athletes. Like, you tend to athletes gravitate towards you who I think are more willing to look inside. Like, there's those athletes that are just like, yeah, whatever I need to do, I'll get it done. And then I think you have, for the athletes that I know, are like really willing to like dig deep and reflect,
Well, I think I've been blessed in that regard, but I think to some extent part of that has been because a long time ago I drew a line in the sand. And you find it this way here at our gym at Stonecutter, but you also find this when you're a coach. You have to draw a line in the sand on who you are wanting to be to the people that you're trying to serve, right? And you have to be willing to reflect and look inside yourself. And what will happen is, if you're around people, whether they're a person you're coaching or a person that you're helping or a person that you're working for or with, you're around people who don't possess that and don't want that or aren't willing to grow into that, what will happen is they will have no problem when you do it, right? But then when they need to do it, at some point they're not going to see the value in that, or I just need to get past it and focus on doing the next thing or working harder or fixing this problem. And those people don't hang around very long, or they don't stay on that journey with you very long.
Right.
Or if they do, it's an extremely unproductive journey. And then those that embrace it start to see that this is what it's really about, you know. And an example, and I'll use Cheryl as an example. You know, the thing about Cheryl is, you know, Cheryl's a take no prisoners attitude, right? She's the honey badger of the 50 to 59. There's a lot of honey badgers in 50 to 59. She's probably one of the top ones, or 55 to 59. And, you know, her results she was ecstatic with. You know, she expressed that. Her husband expressed that.
Yeah, 33rd.
Yeah,
it's a big deal for a first time out.
Especially, you know, with where she was at last year and the year before. You know, she's made huge strides. She's done that work. Now, how she chooses to do that work, based on her body's ability to recover, based on her personality, based on her years of experience as a professional barrel racer, is she's going to grind that out every day. Cheryl works out 6 days a week, and if I don't give her something on day 6, she's going to do something on day 6.
That's right.
Right? She's out at her ranch right now and taking vacation, the air quotes that nobody can see right? She's out probably working the heck out of that ranch and dragging her husband behind her, making him do chores.
Poor Bruce.
You know, so the reality is that that's what works for her. But part of her reflection was, I got way farther this year than I thought in skills. The workouts that she did well in that put her in 33rd were not the workouts she thought she was going to do well in.
Right.
Right. And so that's a huge jump. You know, it was a rebuilding year for her, and for her to get where she's at in a rebuilding year is huge. You know, she had an expectation. I had an expectation she was going to qualify. We had a couple workouts didn't go her way, and she's also got a nagging injury that, you know, we don't like to talk about, but she's got you know, nobody likes to talk about injuries, but she's got a right knee injury that causes a ton of problems, and she was able to do a lot of things with that injury over the last year. So for her, the reflection was, this is where I'm at. I'm going to move on. I'm going to prepare for the Open and do this again, and I'm right there, right? That was her process. For her, it was a very short turnaround. You know, there are other athletes that have to look at things a little bit differently. And I think that the takeaway that I get from that when as a coach, is what I'm doing as far as the athletes that are asking me to work with them and that I work with long term want something more than just that success. You know, they want something more than just the success of competition day. They want to be able to take what they're doing and apply it to their lives and then see it do other things. Whether it's something, we all talk about inspiring people or getting other people to do it, or whether it's just setting that example or raising the quality of life for those in your immediate circle. You know, you're going to do that by setting that example. Cheryl does that here. There's a lot of people here that would not be inspired by someone between the ages of 18 and 45 doing any of this. But the fact that you have somebody that is twice the age of most of the people in the gym doing something that most of the people in the gym half her age can't do is a huge level of inspiration. But I think the thing that she does and the example she sets and her why is work ethic. That's what she's passionate about. Is showing that hard work and consistency
hard work pays off,
matters in all aspects of life. So for her, that's been the big turnaround. And all the other athletes have their things too that they need to focus on. Some of their journeys are more personal than others. Some are things that they're going through themselves. Some are things where they have a higher purpose and a higher meaning to what it is they're doing. But they all are focused on that piece. And I think from my perspective, the thing that is most important with that is, what are you going to do for the next year? Whether it's compete or not compete, how does that affect your training and the next thing you're going to do in your life, and have that clear set of goals? Because otherwise you can start to fall into the trap of devaluing what it is you've just done because it didn't result the way you wanted it, instead of taking what just happened, what it taught you, and applying it to the next thing as you push your boundaries and evolve. That's what's important.
Yeah, right. Like I just finished the Going Right book on the way home on the plane by Logan Gelbrick, and he talks a lot about being in love with the process, whatever your process is, and not to be a results-driven person. And I think Cheryl especially is one that instead of focusing on the results, she really loves the process. Her and I talk about it all the time, is like being in love with coming and training and pushing yourself to the next level every single day is part of the process, and whatever comes at the end is kind of a bonus, which is why I think for her, although I haven't talked to her since I've been back, but not getting to where she wanted to be isn't as depressing, right? Like some athletes who were successful that didn't make it as far this year, it could be a bit depressing unless you can reflect and find that there are qualities that you're acquiring that can be applied in your everyday life.
Yep.
Like I think Teresa is a perfect example. I was watching her Instagram and kind of watching her process how everything went. And I think as great of an athlete as Teresa is, she's also an incredible human being and providing to the community outside of CrossFit, right? But her impact as a CrossFit athlete has been able to give her the opportunity to go out and do this Rec for Arden and make a difference in her church and inspire others in real life, right? Everybody obviously wants to be an athlete not everybody, but our community, right? It sounds sexy to be like the athlete, but in reality, the skills we're acquiring for our real life is really what matters.
Right. And I think, you want to use that example. She has developed a tremendous platform over the years. I mean, you look at that young lady, everything that Teresa does is about somebody else. When you look at everything that she does, she's constantly focused on other people. I mean, on the team I had the pleasure of coaching last year, she was one of the most selfless people on it. I mean, came off the floor after one workout trying to make sure everybody else was okay, grabbing them fit aids. And those are small things, but that shows you where someone's mind's at. Yeah. Right? Someone's mind is not going to be focused on other people in little things if it's not focused on other people in the big things.
Yep.
This is a person that, whenever I walk in the door to hang out or work with her, and, full disclosure, she and her husband are two of my best friends in the world, and that aspect of our life is probably the most important thing to me more than anything, including, coaching and CrossFit and all that. But, that takes first and foremost over anything. I mean, whenever I walk in the door, it's always, how are you doing, right? And as a coach, you never get that, right? When you walk in the door, it's always people immediately pulling on you what they need from you. That's fine. I signed up for that. I'm not complaining about that, but that's definitely not the feeling with someone like that. And that's very rare in an elite athlete to be that outward focused. And what they're doing for Arden and with that ruck is an example of where they're using, what she's built to be able to do that and help somebody, and that's huge, and that has more meaning than anything you can do, at the games. And I know a lot of times people say, hey, we all say that, but here's the reality. This being a sustainably good human being, focused on other people and focused on doing good for other people, is the single hardest thing in the world to do.
Yeah.
There is. And I think that's probably, if there's something I would take away from today or want people to take away from today if listening to this podcast talking about age group online qualifiers, they're like, okay, this guy's a coach, he's a head coach, he coaches at a gym, he coaches normal people trying to stay fit, he coaches elite people, he's just up here talking about his belly weight because that's what he gets to do. And if it's a competition, competition's a very small part of what I do.
Yeah, very, very small.
It's a very small part. But what I would say, specifically when asked the question, what I want people to take away from a podcast about online qualifiers and processes for competitive athletes and the season and how it's going, is I judge an athlete's success every single year based on how focused they are on their family, their friends, and the people around them and what's happening in their lives versus their results. And why I look at that as the number one indicator of their success as a competitive athlete is because that shows that they have the grounded principles and love of the process that is sustainable at this high level of performance, period. Right? You cannot have a high level of performance if you do not have a consistent, outward focused, self-reflective process that keeps you focused on whatever principles you decided to subscribe to, right, to do good in the world. If you don't do that, you cannot go through this beat down every single day, nor will you be a good person when the beat down's over.
Yeah, right.
Because you will struggle when the beat down's over to find meaning, therefore you're not providing value to anybody, right? And then two, if you're not constantly going through that process and making that, you're not going to find truth. You're not going to confront truth in yourself and in others, and you're not going to be able to do that with sustainability. One of my biggest weaknesses is confronting truth in people I care about. I struggle year in and year out, getting better, with taking someone I'm close to, whether it's an athlete, whether it's an employee, whether it's a friend, whether it's a family member, who is struggling to confront their truth, and who's, by virtue of my role in their life or by their request, has asked me to help them, coach them, lead them, mentor them, walk with them. There's a point where I start having that blind eye to confronting that truth. And I have to constantly use, whether it's the competitive aspects of my life or whether it's the coaching aspects of my life in all areas, to remind me that we have to stay focused on that process. Because if you don't help those people confront truth and hold them to that standard of accountability, you're not going to get anywhere. And when a competitive athlete does not have that, then what they'll do is they'll achieve or not achieve, A or B. The result, which is hollow, will either be there or not. And then what they'll do is they'll get on the end of that and they have no tools to provide any value to anybody, and they got to start over again. Now, that's fine if you end up doing that. And for some people, that's their journey. But for me, that's the biggest indicator of success in what, at the end of every competitive season or competition, I'm looking at what have we just been through, and am I seeing the behavior that would show that they're following that, and is it authentic, genuine, and sustainable? And I can say without reservation that most of the athletes I'm working with this year and that I've been helping are doing that.
Right.
But it's also probably, I want to be clear, I don't think that's due to working with me. I think it's that people like that will people like that seek out people like me and others like me because they want that. Yeah. People like that aren't going to be finding people like me unless they've come to that realization and that's something that they want. So it's not a cause and effect. It's kind of like birds of a feather type thing.
Well, and they say that if you want to push the limits or be better, right? Like, it's hard to always want to be better as far as being uncomfortable, right? Like, we seek out people naturally that make us feel good and don't push us, right? But if there's a group of people, like you're saying, that want to be better and want to push their limits, we're going to seek out somebody like you, and you're going to seek out somebody like us who's going to hold you accountable to always pushing us, right? Like, you talk about it being a weakness of yours, but I think we're in place in your life to help push you to keep us accountable. I mean, I know just between us as in like an athlete-coach relation, I'm always like, hey, like, is this okay? Like, do I need to do more? Or am I doing something wrong? Should I be training X? And then we have a discussion that's very truthful and that pushes me to the next level, right? But if we become complacent in our relationship, then neither one of us are going to get better. Me as an athlete and you as a better coach, right? So I think it's really interesting how we tend to either, on one side of the spectrum, people who do want to be better seek out people who are going to push them, and then the people who are like, yeah, no, I'm really comfortable. I don't want to be anything more than I am now. I'm going to exist with these groups of people. Right. It's not wrong, right? It's not wrong or right. It's just interesting how we find our groups of people. We sniff them out. We associate with them. Which, for a lot of people listening to the podcast, I feel like the regionals talk and all of the competitiveness is very applicable to everybody's daily life, right? Like, as a CrossFitter that comes in here, an athlete that comes in and does GPP, same thing applies, right? Like, I remember before I decided to be an athlete when I was in corporate America, and this was like my sanctuary of 1 hour of peacefulness, I still sat at the end of the workout wondering, okay, how can I apply this as a better mentor at my office? Or how can I make things more efficient in my life? Or how did that workout go for me, and how can I be better next time I walk in the door? Right? So the same skills that we're talking about that your athletes have is applicable to the GPP athletes. I think it's just a matter if you want to sit and do it.
100%. I mean, and then what it does is it gives you something daily to practice it, right? So, for a person in corporate America, in your previous position and in previous positions that I held back in the day, right, we do the version of the online qualifier in a microcosm every other day, right? Yeah. More meetings, more projects, more problems, more mergers. Sometimes there's really big things, right? Sure. The equivalent of the CrossFit Games, say big merger and acquisition, and some things it's smaller. But why CrossFit / any type of training or mental training or physical training that you go through and a process that you're adhering to helps you with that is because it takes something and creates a way to practice it without doing that thing so that when you go approach that from a physiological and mental perspective, you can do it over and over and over again. And it's in a way that I think is extremely helpful. Not only from that here it matters, but it also doesn't, right? Here you're safe to fail, you're safe to do things incorrectly, learn from them, move on. Whereas in, say, a professional environment, a lot of times it's do it or you don't have a job, or do it or you don't get the next opportunity. And so it gives you the safety and the practice of doing that and taking those risks over and over and over again, so that when you have to go do it when it matters, win, lose, or draw, in professional world, academic world, life, right? You can confront it and know that, guess what? There's always going to be another day. There's always going to be another opportunity, and I got to stick to the process. So when those things come up, I'm ready to go.
Right.
And so, yeah, 100%. I agree with you that is applicable to the GPP side. And I think it's also important for people out there to know, because this isn't really talked about. Okay. Everyone wants to look at the fact that these wonderful, amazing athletes like, Cheryl or Teresa or, go down the list. You can go to anybody in any of these Masters athletes. You can go down the list of anybody in the regular Open athletes. Most of these people have a job, have a life, have a family, coach at a box, own a box, right? They're doing real life. They're not doing the LeBron James. Hell, they're not even doing the Matt Frazier, because that's a unicorn in the CrossFit world.
Sure.
They're living life and doing amazing things with a bunch of crap on their plate.
Yeah.
And that is a huge thing, right? So when we look at what is important to us, we have to decide what we're willing to do to achieve that, while we're also doing all these other things. And I think that's the thing that when I look at competitive athletes in CrossFit, that's what they're doing more than many other competitive athletes in any other high-level sport that has this type of popularity. And CrossFit has popularity, but again, it's a small microcosm in the grand scheme of things, right? I mean, you can still go in some places and people go, what's CrossFit? Nobody goes, what's basketball?
Yeah, right.
Right? Or what's football? Depends on the country you're in. But
yeah, no, I just had that experience this weekend in Ireland when somebody was asking about it.
It's an opportunity for people to see that those folks are doing incredible things while still doing life. Cheryl still runs a ranch, still does competitive bit racing. She's a wife. She does all these amazing things, and she's still doing something at a high level. That is, to me, one of the things that I always tell people, they go, well, I can't do my job. I can't follow this nutrition plan. I can't go back to school, and I can't take on, a hybrid family because it's just too much. Well, let me tell you something. I got like 9 people I know that can do that, and they're trying to be competitive athletes. You can do that, right?
Yeah.
And it's not to say, well, this is so much harder, so you should be able to do it so much easier. It's that's hard. Someone's doing it. And whatever issues you think that you have that they don't have, everyone's got a challenge internally. I mean, every person we've mentioned on this podcast, from Logan Gelbrick to myself to any of the athletes that we mentioned, we all have things we're struggling with. We all have things that we either talk about, allude to, or don't talk about that make what we do excruciating. I would love to sit here and tell you that I love doing what I do every day, and that there's never a day that I am not ready to pack it in. I want to pack it in every day at some point during the day. We all do. But we have to continue to decide that that's what we want to do, is move forward. And if we don't do that, right, then we have a challenge. And that's what I think we need to learn from these types of situations, is when we're looking at how these people do things, how can I take that and use that to whatever means I can as a blueprint or influence in my own life.
Yeah. I was watching Brene Brown's new Netflix special. Have you seen it yet?
No, I have not, but I know of it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, she talks about, it's a whole premise of like basically getting in the ring and taking the punches. Everybody's going to be in the ring eventually. It's just a matter of if you want to take the punches and learn from them and keep going on. And so I was thinking about that as far as like how that applies to life, because everyone talks about life's not easy, right? Everybody's got challenges. And I just think it's a premise of how you deal with it. right? Adaptation. We were just talking about that at the very beginning, is if you can adapt, you'll get more along with life. So getting in the ring and getting punched is in the inevitable. If I could talk, that'd be helpful. But you're not going to avoid the punches is the point, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody is, and that's your point too. Everybody's got something they're dealing with. And also they're also committing to a process. They're also following through with what they want to do. Like as far as being an athlete, you also have 10 other things. Even if you were the Matt Frazier, he still has processes relating to his nutrition, relating to his sleep, relating to his recovery, relating to his training, right? Like he has to follow processes too. Now, does he have other crap he has to deal with? No, because he's special. Sammy cooks his food. His agent does all the negotiation with everybody else. You promised me you weren't going to hit the microphone.
I didn't slap my hand on the table. I just kicked the table this time. So technically I'm still, no.
Not Josh friendly. I can't do anything to...
I'm going to have to sit in a bubble during the podcast.
We should just give you a headset microphone. Yeah. Is that the problem? So that you don't have to
well,
screw it up?
I think even if you were to go, I mean, here's the thing, right? So one of the things that happened, and just, I'm actually kind of glad you brought this up because I hadn't thought about this before the podcast. So you look at someone like Matt Frazier and you think, okay, he's got, all he has to worry about is waking up and working out. Yeah, but no.
Right.
Right? All that's happened is the level of the game has changed and the level of the stress and the stakes and all of it has changed. Nothing else has changed except that now there's a few things that get a lot of attention and a lot of stress instead of 50 million little things that don't matter or that are smaller taking that time. So yes, he doesn't have to worry about where his next meal is going to come from. He doesn't have to worry about, all these other things. But what he does have to worry about is everything that I'm doing right now achieving exactly what it's supposed to achieve. Is every coach I'm listening to, is every trip that I'm taking, is all of this optimizing what it is I'm doing? And then also, on top of that, he's got this amazing person doing all these things for him. He has these amazing coaches doing all these things for him. How much longer, and I'm not, for you guys, I don't know you, I'm not going to comment on it, I've only met you twice. How much longer is that person going to be able to take on doing that without actually having a full-time relationship that's dedicated to her? I don't know. Who am I to say? Every relationship's different.
Sure, yeah.
Right? But how, that's a question I have to ask myself. How much longer can my family sustain the level of time that I give as a coach? When do things like that need to change? Now, my life's pretty well integrated, and my wife and my children, and especially my wife and my new baby son, are very integrated into the gym. But that doesn't mean that at some point there's a balance there that may have to change. Right? So
like when Emmett decides, or well, not Emmett, but when you guys decide to get Emmett involved in sports, like it's going to be away from the gym.
Right. So there's things that have to make a difference there. And so what I would submit, and the comparison I was going to draw is when I started my career in corporate America, I had small things to worry about. And as I got promoted and went up and went up and went up, and then, up to, major corporate projects with lots of different things going on, and you're at that C level where you think, man, my problems, if I can just get here, and all this crap, you have an admin booking you flights, you have people doing all these different things for you, and my life's just going to get simple. As long as I have to make big decisions, that's going to be easy. Well, let me tell you something. The big decisions are harder, and then what happens is you start making these big decisions, and they either work or they don't work, and you have to make sure that those decisions are in line with where you're headed. And if you lose touch with that, you can wake up one day and find that all these big decisions you were making that was moving the aggregate ship forward left a lot of these little things, including people, off to the side. And then you have a dumpster fire on your own there. So when I look at someone like Matt Frazier, or I look at a senior executive of a company, or I look at someone who has, anything going on in life that's significant, that we look at and say, that is success.
Yeah, right.
The first thing I say to myself is the process and the perspective that they have that's allowing that success also taking into account the other things that have to sustainably be there long term? The relationship with the wife, management of finances, the relationship that you have with your family and friends, children, all that, right? I mean, okay, I can get 20 people to the games, have a wildly successful gym, be changing lives everywhere. I can change your life, but if my kids are a dumpster fire and they don't understand what a process is, and what have I really achieved? If I can't take care of my own children's education and development when that's my responsibility, how the heck am I supposed to do that for athletes? Right? Yeah. Now, you can look at someone like Matt Frazier and say, okay, well, he doesn't have kids, so how does that apply? Well, there's a reason he doesn't have kids. He's not at that season in life yet, and he knows that, right? Whereas you look at someone like Rich Froning, the minute his daughter showed up, life started to change for him because he had that understanding and perspective. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing. Don't know, haven't talked to him about it, but I'm assuming so.
Yeah, right.
There's a shift. And what you'll find is that you have to surround yourself with people in your life that are willing to give you that grace to figure that out, but then you also cannot forget them as you're doing that.
So you're saying Matt Frazier is a unicorn?
No, I'm saying that he has a life and a process that he has shown tremendous respect for what he can't have in his life to achieve what he's achieving. And he's probably uber aware that when he does have other things in his life that he will not be able to continue doing what he's doing. And he's systematically approaching that. And I would hope that with people in his life, like Sammy and everyone else that people like to talk about, he recognizes that there's a shelf life on that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they all do as well. Because you can't have these things pieced together forever. But for as analytical as he is and everything that he said, I have no doubt that that's probably the case. Because, there comes a point where, do I want to do this anymore? Would I rather have a family? Do I want to settle down? Do I want to train like this? It's not a matter of anything other than when that's over, have you conducted yourself previously to where you can just keep rolling along?
Which is probably why I think he even says this in one of his interviews about why he finished his degree, right? Because he wanted to have something after and he didn't know what was going to happen to his career as far as the success he's had. Right, he just started doing it because he needed the money.
Well, and that's the other thing too. I mean, when to an extent, is he a unicorn? Yes. I mean, if you're Matt Frazier and you're making as much money, if not probably more than you could make as an engineer consistently, and you can set yourself up for a significant amount of retirement and do those things, and you're doing it well, and your significant other's on board with that, and you have a support system to do it. Who wouldn't? But that doesn't last forever. And unfortunately, what most people in Matt's position in life do, whether it's in a sport or in business or everything else, is they live like that's how they're going to live for the rest of their lives. And then they end up on the other end of this thing with absolutely nothing, no one, and anything. I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about no relationships, no friends, no wife, kids don't like them. And they're like, what happened? Yeah. I had all the opportunities in the world. What happens? Because you didn't focus on the process. Yeah. You focused on the result. And the result is this odometer where everyone says, hey, I've made it. Well, you don't ever make it.
It's true.
You don't ever make it to where you're going. You get to a waypoint and you're moving on to the next thing until you're no longer moving at all. Mm-hmm. And that's how you have to view it. There's no destination where you just park it. That's something that we get from our sociological and religious views, that there's somewhere that we're going, right? I mean, everyone pretty well knows where I stand on religious beliefs, but even though I believe that there's an ultimate journey, the reality is when you get there, it's not over. It's on to the next thing, right? So my beliefs plug into that idea, right? Other people have believed different things, but no matter what, it never ends what you're doing.
It shouldn't end, right?
And that's the idea. So for me, when people put a destination as a result, and we can't sit there and put a destination as one of our goals. And I'm not just talking about geographic. I'm talking about geographic, financial, the whole 9 yards. That's a sneaky way to start talking about. I'm on a journey. Well, okay, the journey has an end. So it's a sneaky way of trying to put in something that's results oriented versus a process, right? So I don't really like the term journey. I don't use it very much because it's backdooring a result, right? Mm-hmm. That's why the term process is so good, because a process is reusable. A journey is not. A journey ends. So a journey can be part of something, but to me, that's why it's so important to look at life as a process, not a journey, because a journey has an end.
Which is why it's a little bit hard for, I'd at least say, my generation, because we were raised on setting goals and what it's going to take to get to those goals. And so as we are evolving, we're realizing that it's not about the results, it's more about the process. And I'm so thankful for the coaching I had when I was a kid about processes and my father drilling into my head about going out and hitting the ball the same way more than 100 times. Yeah. So that you don't have to think about it when it comes time to, or that you can apply it. I mean, I can go on for days about things I learned in soccer throughout my whole adolescent and collegiate years that is applicable within corporate America, right? And staying strict and following the process, and then now in CrossFit. So changing the idea of results, being results oriented is really hard to get used to, but it's helpful. I'm really lucky that I was taught about processes early in my life, because I watch people who are way more focused on results, and I'm like, you're missing the whole message here. Like, we used to talk about like stopping and smelling the roses. Like, that's kind of like was our roundabout way about talking about processes and not focusing on the result. We just kind of missed it when you guys raised us.
Well, and I think I agree with that 100%. And I think that when you look at our society by and large in the developed world, right? We take something that's not results oriented and we attempt to devalue it by associating it with ambiguity and equating that with laziness or with a lack of productivity. And that isn't necessarily the same thing. I mean, you look, thousands of years ago, the people that came up with a lot of the philosophies and thought processes that we even talk about today or that we use on a regular basis didn't have to do anything. They had the time to spend thinking about and developing those processes, right? From philosophers to emperors to whatever, right? And again, I'm grossly simplifying. So before I get murdered in the social media world about that statement, it's a gross oversimplification. But you cannot have the process development without having people devoted to doing that. That producing a process in and of itself is a result. Following the process is a different matter. But the process itself still is a finite thing that constantly has to be evolved. I fought that in companies. We called them business process evolution groups. And nobody ever wanted to have them on their budget, and nobody ever wanted to pay someone a six-figure salary to be part of that group, because they're not producing anything. They're just talking about how we're going to do it and what we're going to do and make sure it's continually getting done. Well, there's a tremendous amount of value in that.
That's right.
But why it doesn't work in most companies is they go out and hire the cheapest person or the most expensive person or whoever they can get to do it, or just adding it to somebody's job process and saying, okay, go make business process excellence. Well, what does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything, right? Because they're not committed to it. And then the organizations that have it actually have it for what it is, which is you have people with the right mindset, the growth mindset, that understand. They've seen the pink elephant, right? They know the pink elephant. They've seen the pink elephant. They don't need to know where they're going, but then they understand that they're going to try and drag a bunch of people with them that have no idea where they're going and have never seen a pink elephant, so they have to take them there. And the people that understand that, and the leaders that understand that those people have to exist and aren't necessarily going to be providing a tangible financial asset to the business, will enhance the business's ability to produce the results if that's in place. The problem is the turnaround on time on that is longer, and it's hard to quantify in a finance, mathematics, results-oriented Western society. It is near impossible. Yeah. And so it's something that you constantly fight. And why you have people like Jocko Willink, why you have these ideas around extreme ownership seeing such great results in companies, is extreme ownership. The idea of everyone's problem is my problem if I'm the leader, is because what it does is it forces you to find the valuable people who are willing to do that intrinsically. And if you do it that way, then you kind of end up creating the group that nobody wants to create anyway, that's focused on the process. It backdoors it. And a lot of people that take that approach don't even realize that's what they're creating. But it's definitely much more raw, and I can sign up for doing that, right? And I think that that's really what that ends up producing. Because staying committed to a process means we got to talk about it, we got to analyze it, we got to dig into it and go from there.
And I think also holding people accountable, right? Once the process is established and people aren't doing it, you got to have somebody that's willing to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not the process. And it doesn't take the leader, right? We talk about leaders are everybody. You can be a cube, as I'm called at my office, just by a very loving person, a cube dweller. A cube dweller could be a leader as well. It could be your next door cubicle person that says, hey, man, that's not the process.
Yep.
Right? We're doing XYZ and you're doing ABC over here. Like, either you get on board or you got to go, right? You have to have a team of people invested in the process, willing to hold each other accountable. It's kind of like we talked about in episode 1 about our core values, and how I asked you, how do you make sure that those are sustained within our community? Because there's only one of you and 200 of us, right?
Yeah.
And you talk about the committee. The committee is responsible for holding the standard of our core values, and then every member within our gym. So if something comes up, we have the right to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, that's not the core values and that's not how we're doing it around here. It doesn't take you to have to do it. I could do it. Cheryl could do it. Anybody could do it. Yeah. But we've got to be bought into the idea.
I posted this the other day, I think, in that newfangled thing called a story. But, sorry. Figured that'd make you laugh. I posted this, I'm forgetting the name of the writer who wrote it, but he wrote something, and it said, we all have to decide how much truth we're willing to handle. And part of holding someone accountable is determining how much truth you're willing to handle about that person, right? I recently managed an issue today, not necessarily around the gym, but it was around an external matter, and I made that comment to someone and said, well, this is about them confronting truth. I'm like, no. How we do this and how aggressively we do or don't do this and what the result of that is going to happen based on our willingness to confront the truth about that person and our relationship or lack thereof with that person. That's what that's about.
Yeah, which is really hard. And
you know, we all tell ourselves a narrative about people. We all tell ourselves what we believe about people. And then when that gets burst, a lot of times, you know, going back to what I said a few minutes ago about my biggest challenge this year and last year, and something that I'm continuing to push myself on, is not holding the people that I care about the most to the standards that I myself believe in and try and hold myself to. And that's harder. It is harder for me to hold somebody I care about accountable than it is for me to kick myself in my own ass and say, this is what I need to be doing. Because that's me saying I'm not willing to handle that truth about that person. That's me sticking my head in the sand. And
where do you think that comes from?
I think what it comes from is that for myself personally, at least at this point in my life, and what I would say that comes from is that when you have walked the path that I've walked and done the things that I've done to people that weren't necessarily great, you find it very hard to be judgmental of those people, and you find it very hard to hold them to that standard with a term that I think describes how we should be with holding standards, which is relentless, right? You're persistent, you're passionate, you're loving, you're all these things with standards, but then when the people that you care about the most, particularly if they're doing things very similar to how you used to behave, you aren't relentless. And you generally tend to not be relentless because you might not have gotten to where you got to in your own evolution if people were relentless with you. But then again, you have to give them that opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. And it could be said that if people were more relentless with me earlier, that it wouldn't have taken me as long. And so for me, that's a constant development. I think for me, when I'm working with folks like that, I have to remember, look, yes, a lot of people gave me a lot of forbearance, but the alternative to that would have been if they hadn't, would I have gotten to the level of enlightenment earlier?
Right.
And so it's something that's a constant battle, and it's also a habit, right? When you spend a decade doing it that way, and you have to start, you know, and I'll be honest, I've only really tried to change that about how I hold people accountable in the last 2.5 years. There's a lot of unhabit forming you have to undo.
Yeah. When I was leading the team in corporate America, I kind of had the same issue in the simple facts of just having employees showing up late and it spiraling into other things. But for me, I had to look at the fact that I was unwilling to hold people accountable because I was fearful of disengagement, mm-hmm. and I was fearful of rejection. right? Like I didn't want to lose the relationship we had and the buy-in I already had established with the team. So for me, if I was standing up saying, hey, it's unacceptable to be late in a simple example, then I'd be like, oh man, the team's going to think I'm a jerk and not going to do what I need for them to do, right? And then you realize later it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Like
and
the team needs you to be that person.
They need that.
Yep.
You know, I had, not too long ago, there were several folks in and around my life that made the comment to my spouse and a few other folks that they thought I was a people pleaser. And my wife was like, do you know him? I haven't met a human being that cares less about what other people think about him than Josh. And that's probably true, and I would agree with that. I actually have about this much, and I have a 0, for those of you who can't see this, a 0 given about what people think about me personally. Mm-hmm. Didn't used to always be that way, but over the course of my life and the way it has gone, I have no worries about that. But what has created behavior that makes people think that is my weakness of being having an inability, particularly with those around me, particularly if those around me are causing great pain, from confronting their truth and dealing with that. Mm-hmm. That isn't people pleasing. That's my lack of ability to confront truth in those people and enabling that. And the lack of confrontation and corrective behavior and support in that corrective behavior that I give them creates an enabling environment that makes that worse.
Yeah.
And
it just festers if you don't deal with it, which is why I think in the last year, I didn't know you before you participated in committing to holding people accountable. But I know in the last year, watching you confront people in their truth and holding them accountable for the standard has really been a big benefit to our community, right?
Yeah.
The adaptation in which the community kind of shrugged their shoulders and moved on,
yeah,
I think is a little evidence of the fact that it actually does benefit the team. When I say team, I mean our community, mm-hmm. for our leader to hold people to hold the standard, right. For the people that are not following the core values, an example.
But I think what's been really interesting for me is that I can tell you right now, going through that, and this is applicable to anything in life, if you are willing to go through that and you're willing to make that leap and you're willing to hold yourself to that standard of behavior and confronting those things and working through that all-encompassing black cloud of misery you think is going to happen when you do that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It ends up, you hurt. There's pain. It's tough. Don't get me wrong. Uh-huh. But what ends up happening is you start to see that the overall tonic of benefit that gives the people that you're trying to help the most is 10 times whatever singular interpersonal thing or truth you were telling yourself about a person or a group of people. Mm-hmm. Right? And you get beyond it so quickly. And honestly, the thing that I've mapped back and have used to confront this in myself has been looking at leaders that I followed and coaches that I had where I told myself that narrative and never confronted that truth. And when I finally got through that truth, the tremendous amount of empowerment and relief that I felt in being able to move forward is what I go back to in my head when I'm dealing with current situations, mm-hmm. to keep me focused on, look, this is actually how this is going to be happening, right? And when you're smart enough to fool yourself, you have to have those markers to tell you, don't go that way.
Yeah, right.
Because you can talk yourself into going any way you want, particularly if your life's work is trying to help people talk themselves into doing the right thing. You can make yourself believe that the right thing is 50 million other versions of the truth if you don't have those markers already set up in advance. And it's funny, using that as an example. Recently I had to deal with a situation, and because I said every single time I'm confronted with a situation, I'm going to go back and I'm going to reread these things I've written to myself about what I've been through in the past and how it went and why I need to do things this way. I couldn't even remember those until I read them, and they're like, oh yeah, because your brain blocks that out. Mm-hmm. And you start telling yourself your own version of 50 million different truths, and then you go back and you're like, no, wait, this is it. This is what I need to do. And then you do it, and the world's a lot better for it.
We call that going right.
Yeah. Yes, we do.
That's perfect.
I still need to read the book.
can loan it to you.
Yeah, that's going to be my project over the week that I'm on vacation with my family in July. I'm going to read it then. I've got a lot of things that I'm doing between now and then that need me to focus on the process and need me to focus on what I'm doing. And I think if I stay focused on those things and then get to the end and kind of use that to measure up to have I actually organically gone where I need to go with that, great. It's going to help me identify that gap. Mm-hmm. One of the things I'm really good at is I can read and I can assimilate quickly and put into practice what I read. And one of the things, and I followed Logan and several people like him for a long time, so I really want to see if where I'm at is close to the framework that he is suggesting without having read it. Have I internalized enough of what I've read of his and from other folks and that to the system that works? If I have, great, then I think I'm on to truly internalizing it. If there's a really big gap, then okay, great. We started somewhere. Where's that gap and why does that gap exist? And that gap is going to have been created by my bias and my own narrative, whatever that gap is.
Right. Yeah.
And that's going to identify that. So I'm looking forward to reading that book, and I'm jealous that you all get to read it, but it's I'm looking forward to it.
I really liked it. I thought it had good stuff in it, and he's done a lot of his research. I mean, he cites a bunch of psychologists and philosophers and all sorts of good stuff, but that's all the nerdy stuff. But I was really pleased to know, right, because Logan's just come into my life within the last year, so I haven't had the information that you've had all these years. But I was very excited to read it and be a bit reflective on my life up to this point and be really thankful for the coaches I have had and the way my parents raised me. Because through his process, he talks about, or through the book, he talks about like commitment and response and finding a process and flow and all these different ways in which we need to exist in the world. Mm-hmm. And I was on point for some of them, for most of them, right? Commitment's not an issue for me. The one that I found I need to do better at is flow.
Yeah. Finding
flow. It was really interesting to know that pushing yourself to the next level as far as difficulty and also the enjoyment of the processes in which you would find flow. At least that's how I understood it. I want to go back and read more or maybe just talk to him about it.
You'll get to do that here before too long.
Yeah. So anyways, I just thought it was really cool. I wanted to keep reading. I kind of had like that depressing moment. Have you ever had that when you read a book? Like you just close it at the end and you're like, oh, it's over. You don't have that?
I do. And usually when I read a book like that or participate in any seminar or learning event or experience, what I've personally changed, or not changed, but what I've recognized that in myself, at least for me, is the feeling of, oh crap, now I actually have to go do something.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Right? Maybe. It's like, wow, all this great stuff. It's all, oh no. Now I actually have to go live this out.
Yeah, right. I know. I sent him a message when I left to London and said, I'm so sad that I'm going to read this on this plane. I'm going to be stuck with nobody to talk about it with. Mm-hmm. I'm like, the stranger sitting next to me probably doesn't want to know anything about it. And he's like, just go to the gym. He's told me some gym in London to go see that he mentors, and you can talk to people about it. I'm like, my data plan doesn't allow me to text anybody. Josh is going to think I'm nuts because I'm texting him at 3 a.m. about stuff.
Well, I think, yeah. I mean, it's a great feeling to finish something like that and realize that you've gotten a window and a set of processes and tools and things that you can use. But then it's also that feeling of, okay, well now we've read it, we felt that we can debate it, we can talk about it, we can have that. But all of that is still a precursor to actually doing.
Yeah.
And the problem is that as sexy as all that stuff is, and as challenging as all that stuff is, when we're talking about it, the application of it is incredibly uncomfortable, incredibly disconcerting, and really puts us in a tough place. And I think that even if we're not thinking about it at that moment, we're wired that way. Our body's wired for self-preservation, and it does not like going mentally or physically down that path. And so it already starts going, oh man, I'm just depressed. I need to sit here. You know what? I'm going to go have cookies.
Yeah. No, it's
How did I go from reading going right to like slamming cookies at the Starbucks in the airport? Well, it's called avoidance.
No, it's true. I was trying to think of a way to get somebody who doesn't really dabble in like self adaptation and like growth and all of that. Like maybe if someone's interested in this book or in who Logan is, I was trying to explain it to somebody and I attribute it to like the first time you had to like lean in for the first kiss. It's like super scary and you're like, I really want to, but I don't know if they want to. And then once you do it, then it's like, oh, okay, it wasn't as scary. It's kind of like you talking about how this looming dark cloud and all these ideas of like what could happen if we approach somebody and talk. Like if I were to come to you about your truth, I'm like, oh my God, he's going to think I'm nuts. He's going to hate me. He doesn't want to be my coach anymore. Like, right? Like that's what we start to do. And then if I get the courage, when I get the courage to come to you and talk to you about something, whatever that is, and then your response is like, not at all what I was expecting, then it's like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Well, and it's, that's the thing. I like first kiss is a great analogy. Another great analogy is the first time you're out on your own, you realize, oh crap, I have to pay my own bills. I have to do my own stuff. And then, but what's really interesting is most people adapt to that very quickly. Most people adapt to it very quickly.
Well, it's because we're self-preserving people, right?
Right. They adapt to that very quickly when they realize, wait a minute, I have to do this myself. And when, this type of thing is very similar. And
yeah, you just have to be more committed. Like, paying your own bills and stuff, it's a have to, right? Because I want to come home to a house. Whereas this is like, I'm actually okay with who I am, right? Whereas it's like, I am okay with who I am, but I want to be better. So now I've got to be committed to applying it. You really have to go out on a limb and be really vulnerable to do it every single day.
It's a key understanding. There are people that can read this. And the one thing I told somebody who I recommended the Going Right book to, and a couple other books I've read over the years too, is I gave this person 5 books and I told them to buy Going Right, and I said, you need to read these books, but you need, and I put a sticky note on top of every book, and what I said was, you need to remember that when you're reading these books at the beginning and the end, and when you're applying this in life, that you do not have whatever you want to call it, the highest expression of your craft, your best version of yourself, best results, but whatever you want to call it, you are not able to achieve that as a human being, as a mom, a dad, an athlete, whatever, unless you understand that discomfort and stress, both physical and mental, is essential to life. If you don't understand that that is what makes life better, whether you're a plant, a bird, a human being, a kid, if you don't understand that, then these things are going to sound great, but you're not going to understand how they work.
Yep.
Right? If you understand that hardship and challenge is as essential to human existence, or the existence of life, as is water, then this will all make sense. Because the common theme running through all of these things is you cannot access any of the stuff they're talking about without fundamentally understanding and be willing to go through whatever challenges they're saying you have to go through. That is how we are created, evolved, developed, whatever you want to call it. That's what this world is about. Structure to unstructure, challenge to result, right? We have to go through those things, and you cannot grow stronger, you cannot adapt if you don't have pain, if you don't have things pushing you. And if those things aren't understood thoroughly, and one of the books was a book explaining that concept, was the one I recommended they read first, then nothing else makes sense.
Yeah, which is why people choose to go left to avoid the pain and the difficulty, right? And that's why he talks about he phrases it going right, because that's where you're going to find the difficulty and the challenges the pain of growth, right? So technically Logan says that the only certainty we do have is uncertainty, right?
Yep.
We don't know.
That's right.
So why not choose that path anyways? Because it's inevitable that we're going to have problems, whether you go left or right.
Yep.
So why not just go right?
100%.
Right? So cool. So these athletes for the regionals, going right?
Yeah. I think they all are.
What about coach?
I'm going hard right. I've been going hard right for a long time. The car might be on fire, and it might be driving off the edge of the road, and I might be caffeine deprived, but I'm making it. No, I think with everything that's coming on down the pike for the gym and for me personally, and all the things we have on the horizon, they're all challenges. and they're going to continue to have challenges from a community perspective, staffing perspective, life perspective, and I'm going to have to embrace those. And I think on top of that, my son who had a surgery in January is going to have that surgery again in July. Top all those things, and so it's going to put that stuff to the test. But I'm looking forward to that simply from the standpoint of I'm looking forward to it only because I know what I have to do to go through it and make it the best possible thing it can possibly be. And I'm also blessed because I'm surrounded by an army of people who are like-minded and wanting to do the same thing. And so, all the challenges that I went through and our gym went through and other areas of my life went through this last year have showed me that this year we'll get through those just like anything else. So yeah, I think, the people I have the luxury of coaching and the privilege of helping are going right. I think we're trying to go right as best we can as an organization. I know that I feel like I'm doing my best to go right, and I think that where we're at right now is on that path. But it's you have to be constantly vigilant that you don't end up at a left-hand turn on the right, going right road, no matter how far you go down it, because you can U-turn and go a long way really quick, not even realize it.
Yep.
You can go backwards on the right highway.
Yeah, that's very true. I almost did that when I was in Ireland.
Carbohydrates.
Because they go on the other side of the road and on the other side of the car. It's like, holy cow, I need arrows. Thank God for arrows. Well, let's give the people a little bit of update in case they haven't gotten the message, because you have been posting it on social media. You have been sending out emails. Let's make sure the people know that CrossFit Stonecutter is going to have a new home June 1st.
Yep. If you go to our site, there's a whole piece of the site dedicated to it anywhere on social media. On June 1st, we're going to be moving across the highway here in Tomball, Texas, to a new contiguous facility.
Very exciting.
We are looking forward to that.
Josh doesn't look excited to everybody, but he is excited on the inside.
I'll be excited when
it's over.
When it's over. We're going to be doing a lot of work over the next few weeks to move and do that. We were very blessed to have that come up after our building project went off the right path, if you will. And I'm really looking forward to getting that done. It's going to be a great opportunity for everyone to be together in the same space. It's going to give us an opportunity to do a lot more with what we're going to do with our programs. And I think it's just going to overall be good to have that off the docket. For our community the last couple of years, a move is something we've been wanting to do, been talking about, been planning for, been pushing towards. And now that we're here and we're going to have that done, we're going to be able to settle in for a little while and really enjoy what we're doing without having to worry about that next step. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun, but it's also going to be a lot of work. And so I'll use the happy face. Hey, I'm wearing my free hug shirt.
I see that.
Shout out to Randy. I'll have my free smiles back up when we're done with that.
Yeah, I wanted people to be aware when they come into the gym, because I overheard a member today say that the changes in the gym they don't like, right? Because we're putting the walls back up, things are not in the places they normally are, things are dirtier than they normally are, right? And it was the perfect time for me to say, is it because you don't like change, or is it just because it's different, right? So members need to be aware that when they come into the gym for now until the June 1st move, that it's going to be a bit different within the gym, but classes will still go, community are still going to be here. It's not about the environment as far as like machinery and where they are and where it sits. But I think it's good to have what's normal, quote unquote, be a little bit fluffed up and moved around to help people adapt.
Yeah, and that's an example of everything we just talked about.
That's
we
right.
all have our own versions of what we expect to happen, no matter how much things are communicated. And then when they're not that way, we feel betrayed, left out, uninvolved, whatever, all the different emotions you feel. And then when you're out, it's like, I had no expectation of what this was supposed to be. And so it is what it is. I need to move forward with it. But that's a very good point. And it's the old "who moved my cheese."
That's right.
It's one of the original versions of trying to go right.
Yeah, so true. I love change as much as anybody else, and so I'm excited to see what's to come and to see the different atmosphere, what it can create, and learning new skills on how to adapt. I love it. I love watching people adapt and squirm a little bit. That's my favorite part of the human evolution. But thanks for stopping in on your crazy next 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Joshua is in a very rare form today, and me coming back from vacation, I was kind of felt a little selfish by asking him to do a podcast, but I thought it was good to have him on to recap regionals, make sure we talk about what's coming up next as far as the gyms move and how we can all be better human beings every day and learning how to go right and making the conscious decision to get in the ring and take a punch every day, because that's what life's about. Next week, I think we have a new topic on deck that's exciting for me. It's new. I know nothing about it, so I'm excited to hear from the folks about it. With that, thanks again, Josh, for coming to Pound the Rock podcast. Please like, subscribe, and comment through Apple Podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Google. It really helps to make sure we know if we're touching people out there on topics. If you have a topic idea, feel free to send us a message, send me a DM, or or post a comment, and we will be more than happy to discuss those topics through Josh's acceptance.
Perfect.
Thanks, and we'll talk to you next week.
When nothing seems to help, I look at a stonecutter hammering away at his rock, perhaps 100 times, without as much as a crack showing in it. Yet, at the 100th and first blow, it will split in two, and I know it was not the last blow that did it, but all that had gone before.